Hello and good morning. I'm Strangleborn. This is a double book review. We are talking about books 1 and 2 of Dungeon Crawler Carl. The first one is Dungeon Crawler Carl. The second one is Carl's Doomsday Scenario. And the reason why we're doing both of these books at the same time is because, well, I wanted to, because I read them both in the same month. And it's Dungeon Crawler Carl seems to be a pretty linear book, so I think it'll be okay. We're going to talk about the first one. We're going to end on the second one. I'm not going to give too much away. Quick and dirty review. I'm not a professional. If you want somebody professional, there are places online to go. I'm just some guy that likes to read books. So, Dungeon Crawler Carl is about this man named Carl and his cat, Princess Donut. She's a show cat. They are outside because she's decided to jump out the window and climb a tree. So Carl goes out to intervene and try to get her out of the tree, and he witnesses an event that happens everywhere around him, which he discovers later, that the entire earth and all of its structures have been squished flat, and anybody caught in those structures is immediately dead. Anybody who's outside, they're given an opportunity to go down into the dungeon. Now, the dungeon is made of the raw materials that have been harvested from Earth, bits of junk here and there, the structures that have been squashed flat. It's this entire dungeon that has been crafted and made by this alien race and televised for a reality game show. And this game show is universal. Everyone in the universe can watch different people. They can watch Carl, they can watch it, and there's a whole plethora of players. You're watching in the first book, you're watching that countdown of like 13 million people or so are alive, and then, you're just watching it trickle down to 10 million, and it's just crazy watching the numbers drop. Now, Carl and Princess Donut they decide to go down because they live, I believe he's from Washington. And so at the point in time this happens, it's freezing there. And so he is in his underwear and he takes his cat down there, and he is quickly met with, he gets into a little bit of a fight, and then he meets Mordecai. He's a safe room. He's a guy. He's like a tutor. He's an NPC. Without going too crazy into the details, this first book is just learning about the game show, learning about leveling up, getting skills, grinding. It is essentially, you are witnessing Carl and Princess Donut go through the dungeon, fight bosses, level up, get new gear. One of the running jokes is that Carl is trying to find a pair of pants, and I've seen the covers for every Dungeon Crawler Carl, and he's in his underwear the whole time. I don't think the game is going to let him get pants, but I don't know. It's funny. It's a running joke and it's hilarious. This book, there's an author, I can't remember the name, on the back. It says this book has no business being as deep as it is, and that is true. This book it has its moments where it's brutal. It has its moments where it's seriously laugh out loud funny, and then there's moments where it's super tense. You're just kind of baffled. How can this book, being as silly of an idea as it is, be so good and also so heart-wrenching at times and so action-packed? It's just fun, and it is ripping fast. It is unbelievably fast how quick you can read through this book. And I would venture to say, I don't know if people know this, but usually you can find a sample on Amazon or on Google Reads or anything like that. If you're skeptical about reading Dungeon Crawler Carl, or really any book for that matter, just see if there's a sample. Just read the sample text, and it should give you a pretty good idea. I would say within the first 10 to 15 minutes, maybe 40 minutes. I said 30 to 40 minutes in my tier list video. That's a good enough indicator of going to tell whether or not you're going to like this book, if it's just going to work for you. Because I know for some it's not, because not a lot of people are like into video games and stuff like that. It's a fun read, and it's honestly like a perfect palate cleanser book in between big fantasies. but it is also a contender for some of the best fantasy in modern day times. It's super good. It's like a great blend of sci-fi and fantasy. It's truly a magnificent read. So the second one, I can't really go too far into it, but we screamed through the first 2 levels in the first book. That's okay. I can divulge that information. It's fine. You scream through the first 2 levels, and the first 2 levels are pretty rough, and there's some significant boss fights in them. But we're okay. There's 7 books of Dungeon Crawler Carl, so if you don't have to worry about, things happen. It is about Dungeon Crawler Carl, and you find out in the first book that getting to level 3 is kind of a big deal. It's different than the first 2 levels. The first 2 levels almost, I imagine it like a corridor of just rooms and hallways, and I imagine it almost kind of like Portal. You know how if you've ever played Portal, everything's just white rooms and you're doing all these puzzles and stuff. I imagine it like that. I don't know why I go there. I don't even think it explicitly says in detail if it looks that way, but I just imagine it that way. It just seems like that's where my brain went to. So I'm imagining all these fights in rooms like that. The second book is it looks like an actual place, even though you can still see like the lights and all this stuff. It's a lot more filled out. It looks more like an area, like a something you'd find on a map in a video game. There's all these little villages and towns and all this stuff, and they have safe rooms dotted out everywhere and restrooms everywhere. Now we're getting into like quest territory, and there's this pretty significant thing that happens, in the first third of the book that is kind of rough. I'm not going to give it away. But what you experience in the first book is fly through 2 levels, fight, kill bosses, level up, get the map, try to find the exit before the levels collapse. Well, in the third one, we're questing, we're slowing down. The book is still really fast. It's strange that it is still as fast as it is. There's so much happening, but we're not flying through the levels. It is seriously confusing to me how we can fly through the first book and go through 2 levels, and then we can fly through the second book and only do 1 level, but there's so much happening in that third level. The time slows down. It's still crazy fast. You're going through the quests. You're hanging out with Mordecai. I love Mordecai. He's one of my favorite people in this whole thing. Obviously Donut and Carl too. It's so much fun, y'all. You see these other dungeon crawlers. We end up picking up somebody for one of the other crawlers because she's like on the other side of the dungeon and she can't get to him, and so she's kind of asked Carl if, hey, I've got somebody from my crew that got separated, would you mind if they tagged along until we can get back to them and all that stuff. So it's just an awesome book. It's fun, it's hilarious, and it is gripping, and it is crazy fast. Highly recommend. Check out Dungeon Crawler Carl. It's free on Kindle, man. If you just do like a free trial, you could have probably all of them read in 7 days if you really wanted. But the first 7 books, I believe, are on Kindle Unlimited. So, or just go buy them at Barnes and Noble. They have them at Barnes and Noble and Booksmith and all that stuff. But amazing. I love it. My wife loves it. This is kind of like we read them together, and it's a household favorite here. Thanks for watching. Have a beautiful rest of the day. We'll see you in the next one.